All right, that is my cue to get us started. So welcome everyone. Welcome to today's PSU Transportation Seminar. My name is Jennifer Dill. I'm Director of TREC, the Transportation Research and Education Center here at PSU that I think all of you are pretty familiar with. I'm going to be introducing and moderating today's seminar. Our they're normally our Friday transportation seminars. That is a habit for almost 20 years now, since the year 2000, more than 20 years. Obviously, today's not Friday, special seminar on a Thursday. But these seminars are usually held live here on Portland State University's urban campus, located on the ancestral homelands of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Tumwater, and Wallala bands of the Chinook, the Tualatin Kalapuya, and many other indigenous nations of the Columbia River. It is important that we acknowledge that we are here because of the sacrifices forced on the indigenous ancestors of this place, remember these communities, and honor their legacy, lives, and descendants. Today, we are very pleased to have Dr. Edward Smaglik presenting on Leading Pedestrian Interval Implementation Guidelines in Phoenix, Arizona, a data-driven approach. Dr. Smaglik is a professor at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, Arizona, in the Department of Civil Engineering, Construction Management, and Environmental Engineering. The director of AZTrans, the Arizona Laboratory for Applied Transportation Research. Dr. Smaglik has over 13 years of academic research and teaching experience, preceded by 2 years' experience as a postdoctoral research associate. He currently serves as chair of the TRB ACP 25 Traffic Signal Systems Committee, very important, and his research focuses on advanced uses of vehicle detection, traffic signal systems analysis, transportation performance measures, and multimodal operations. So before I turn it over to Ed, need to do some logistics overview of today's seminar. Our speaker is going to present for about 35 or so minutes, followed by question and answer. For those of you online, and I think we have a lot of you online, we will be receiving questions through the Q&A feature on your Zoom control panel. If we run out of time, given the volume of people, we might, we will give our speaker the opportunity to email written responses, but I can't commit him to doing anything. We have enabled closed captioning, but you need to click on the closed caption feature to view them. We are recording today's seminar. It will be on the website in the near future. Often we have it up within the day. We have some staffing shortage right now. People are out, so I can't guarantee you it'll be up that quickly, but it will be up for future viewing. You could share with your friends and colleagues and family. We will also post the slides. If you are tracking professional development hours, this webinar is available for 1 hour continuing education credit. If you are in the room, please remember to sign in on the sheet near the door to record your attendance. This is required for professional development credit and helps track our event attendance and for future planning purposes. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Ed. And Becca's going to switch out the slides. That's for you. Oh my gosh, thank you. Happy New Year, too.
Awesome. So thanks, everybody. Good afternoon. Hello to those of you online. Quick clarification, I must have sent you an old bio. I'm no longer chair of a committee. I was thrown out with the bathwater back in May of last year. But anyway, so apologies for grabbing the wrong file when I sent it off to you all. So thanks for having me. This is a project that was funded by the City of Phoenix about 1.5 years ago. Other faculty that worked on this with me, Dr. Stephen Gerke, which some of you all might know, he sends his regards, and then Dr. Ben Russo, who likely would send regards but didn't tell him I was going to be here. So anyway, we also had students that worked on this. One of them in the room today, James, was one of the data reduction people. So when I talk about the slide where there's inherent errors in manual reduction, we can all look at James. Right. So, all right. I was talking to my friend Peter, who works at Portland, about this, the data-driven guidance for LPIs, and the first response is, well, why not put them everywhere, right? When students ask that question, I use the term operational objective, in that not every intersection has the same objectives. In a town like Portland, objectives have been different for a long time in places like Arizona, Phoenix in particular. So this project came out of an IGA we have with the city of Phoenix that asked for guidance in a number of different areas. One thing that we also did that was published from this was we mapped the cone for no-touch pedestrian push buttons, because vendors don't really have that available, so we have that out there somewhere in the ether, as well as some other guidance on barn stances and other pedestrian treatments for Phoenix. So anyway, thanks for Phoenix for funding this, and to my colleagues for helping us work. My button's not working. All right, okay, so for those who may not be familiar with what a leading pedestrian interval is, it is putting the walk indication up 7 seconds before the concurrent green indication comes on. It gives pedestrians a chance to establish themselves out in the street, making themselves more visible, and also can give them a chance just simply to get off the curb in some areas. So these are used in a lot of areas in Portland, and it's a proven safety countermeasure. It helped us reduce that conflict between pedestrians and turning vehicles. Here's a picture of one of those, one of these in place. So we've got the walk indication is up, and the signal indications are still red. So Phoenix wanted guidance on implementation of these, right? Complaint comes in from an alder person as to, we've got a challenge at this intersection. Funds are limited. Even though these look like they're very, very simple, just a simple signal timing change, there actually can be a lot more to it based upon the configuration of the intersection, existing equipment, things like that. So Phoenix wanted a way to go through and look at site characteristics and identify a way to prioritize locations. So we did a literature review just to see what was out there, because there are various other documents that are out there. City of Portland has one. We did a crash analysis, and this really there were two parts of this, or two goals of the crash analysis. One is to get an idea of, are these intersection characteristics that we might have seen in previous guidelines that are published, how do they impact, or how have they impacted crash frequency in Phoenix? As well as to allow us to prioritize locations in the city for data collection, as we wanted to do before and after study with and without an LPI. We identified sites, we did volume analyses of these, collected data, and then did manual reduction to identify user behavior changes, a bit of modeling, and then we developed a guideline for the city. All right. So not everyone behaves the same behind the wheel of a car. I remember 6 or 8 years ago, I was up here with Peter Kuntz and I were on a bike ride, and we were in, Selwood area. People stop the car a quarter mile from it because they see, and then we're out in Russian, and I swear the person accelerated to try to hit us. So just in those small areas, folks behave differently behind the wheel of a car, right? So even though there's information out there about user behavior in other locations, it may not be the same in the jurisdiction where you're actually operating, right? As I noted in the previous slide, we wanted to identify the impacts of factors that have been considered in guidelines, as well as allow us to prioritize locations for data collection. Right? So as part of the crash analysis, our students looked at all the intersections in the city of Phoenix. We had crash data from 2016 to 2022. We were looking at turning vehicle pedestrian crashes. We had just under 800 of those, and just under 2,000 of total pedestrian involved crashes. Just for clarification, Dr. Russo led this part of it. So anyway, if something's wrong, it's his fault. Anyway, so that was our data set we had for this. We looked at everything we pretty much could without having to go to the site as far as characteristics. Some of the things we wanted to make sure we looked at were things that may have appeared in other LPI guidelines. So Toronto has one, Phoenix has one, Portland has one, and there's other ones that are out there that we developed or we picked up on during our literature review. So type of intersection, one-way street, is there a median? How close are you to a school? How close are you to a transit stop? What are vehicle volumes on the major and minor street? How much activity is there around there? Are there push buttons? Push buttons is an interesting thing because in a lot of locations in Phoenix there are push buttons, but they don't work. It just runs in pedestrian recall. Right? So for those that don't know what ped recall is, it's just where we automatically bring the walk indication up every time the concurrent green indication. Right? Not sure why that's the case, but that's just part of the environment. Was there protected phasing? Are there exclusive left turn lanes? And some other items as well. So just a couple of pictures of what we pulled from this. So here's our locations of schools, transit stops. Google Street View and aerials were very helpful. As always, there's things that don't make sense when you look at that. There's construction, but we kind of worked through that. And then there's our employment density as well. So just some summary statistics from what we picked up. Almost 80% of our intersections were within 300 feet of a transit stop. Right. We had a crosswalk, or push buttons on one or more legs. I noticed that, and I noted before that doesn't mean all that much just by the way things are kind of implemented there. A lot of right turn lanes, a handful of T intersections, and a couple other criteria there on the screen you see. Right. Here's a heat map of our turning vehicle pedestrian crashes. This is our downtown Phoenix area. And then you do also see some other activity centers kind of around there in the uptown area. And there's some other, here's another area where we have a reasonable amount of commercial activity. Negative binomial models were used to look at the crash frequency as well as predict pedestrian crash frequency. And then we're looking at turning vehicle pedestrian crashes. So really looking at outcomes of the model, we see that if we have a crosswalk on four legs, we're much more likely to have crashes. Makes sense, more crosswalks, more conflicts, things, which is really when you're looking at a model like this, you're trying, do these things really make sense? Higher volume on the minor road, all right? Higher chance of having crashes, more activity, right? Although we really were in kind of that middle spot was our highest amount. And then our T intersection indicator was up here with 50% change. Again, a lot of these things are things that actually appear in other LBI guidelines. They weren't specifically selected because we saw prevalence of them in the city of Phoenix. Right. Some of the things that were excluded, raised medians, right turn slip lanes, light rail tracks in the intersection, exclusive left turn lanes and protected right or left turn phases. These were not significant. If you haven't been to Phoenix in a while, we do have light rail on, it doesn't cover a lot geographically, but it goes a long way geographically, if that makes sense. It's probably 25, 30 miles from the center of the valley down to downtown and out to the eastern suburbs. So we're slowly building that network. Right. Oops. Thought I had hidden this slide because I already talked about this. This was the slide that had all the arrows before, so apologies. I'll go on to the next slide. Okay, so first we want to look and see what impact on expected crashes various intersection characteristics had, and then the other purpose of the crash analysis is to get an idea of where we have a lot of these crashes as good locations that could be fruitful for the before and after study. We want to make sure that we have exposure, that we have that vehicles and pedestrians crossing paths reasonable enough or often enough that we can actually get some good before and after data from it. Right? So the intersections that we selected are listed right here. Right, we rank them from highest to lowest crash frequency, and then we just iterated with the sponsor on which ones kind of made the most sense, what was going around those intersections, things like that. Right, so most of these are kind of out in the I would say outlying areas, but they're not really in the downtown area. Washington and 3rd Street is the only one that really is right in the downtown area. So then, at each of these intersections, excuse me, the city of Phoenix collected volume counts for pedestrians and turning movement counts from 12 to 1 and then 5 to 6 p.m. Right? And when we look at the conflicts that a pedestrian has when they're in the crosswalk, if I'm on this east leg crossing going north, I've got to watch out for vehicles that are turning northbound right, westbound right, and then southbound left if I have permitted phasing. So something that we use as part of this analysis, certainly we looked at the number of pedestrians, number of turning conflicting vehicles, but we also did the cross product, right? And the cross product is something that you'll find in traffic engineering in other places. Specifically, one location is when we're looking at possibly installing a left turn protection, right? So with my left turning vehicles, I can use permitted only phasing if I have ample gaps coming at me and the conflicting through movement, right? But once I get to a certain number of vehicles coming at me and the conflicting movement and then turning left, there just simply aren't gaps available. The cross product is one of those things that's been used in literature in that area. So we looked at that as well here too. So very simple. We looked at each leg during the two time periods, and then just looked at which ones had the highest cross product. Went through and just sorted those. Right. We wanted to make sure that we had no more than 2 legs in any given intersection. We didn't want to have all our data collection at one intersection. We had a total of 8 locations budgeted, so 10 hours data before, 10 hours after. So you will see that we did include, even though Washington 3rd is a little bit farther down the list, again, the grade outlines are the ones that we went with. This is one that was our sponsor requested that this one be part of the analysis right downtown. It actually does have, by far, the most number of pedestrians, just doesn't have that many conflicting turning vehicles. So here are aerials of our intersections, right, with each crosswalk turned a site. So this is the one that is the downtown area. You'll notice that the geometry is a bit narrower than the other locations, right? This baseline and 51st Avenue and then Indian School and 51st Avenue and really Indian School and 19th Avenue, those are your typical Phoenix intersections, right? 45 mile an hour, typically a 5 to a 6 lane cross section, large distances for pedestrians to cross. These specifically had activity areas that were around them that gave us enough, that we had enough activity to collect data, get reasonable results. But so when you think about, why it's important to do work like this specifically in Phoenix versus using information from Toronto and Portland, this is one of the big reasons, right? Just a very different operational environment for all users involved. Right. So our video data collection, we avoided the summertime for obvious reasons, right? People don't tend to go out when it's 115 if they can avoid it, or if they are out, it's dark outside. That's a whole different analysis. Our before phase was in the fall of 2023, and our after phase was in the late winter, early spring. Actually, it's all winter based on the calendar of 24, excuse me. We did put Royal Phoenix, put new traffic pattern ahead signs out there. We collected from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. We did this for 10 hours, 8 hours before, put the LPI in, let them burn in for, can't remember, I think we left it out there for 2 weeks. I can't remember offhand, but we wanted to make sure users got used to that being there before we collected the after data, then we collected the after data, right? We went with 5 seconds. What does Portland use? Oh, you were there.
Yeah, that's a range, but 5 seconds is probably the most common. It goes up to 8 seconds.
Yeah, so we, literature said 3 to 7 commonly, and we didn't have great guidance, and Phoenix was comfortable with using 5. So we went with 5 seconds. So there isn't anything really too scientific behind that, other than just selecting something in the middle of the road. It doesn't appear in this presentation, we did actually do on one of the sites, no LPI, then no LPI with no right turn on red signs. And just to see what would happen, and our compliance rate of the vehicles to the no right turn on red signs was about 53%. Now, keep in mind, this is an environment where, you know, very wide, I think it was based on a 51st. Wide cross sections, not always a lot of pedestrians around, and a driving population that really isn't used to seeing signs like that. So I'm not trying to make amends for how bad the Phoenix drivers were, but that's just kind of what we saw. So we did look at that as a possibility, but we moved past it. So for data collection, we did post-encroachment time, right? Crashes are fortunately rare, and they're also random experiences or random occurrences. And typically, if I want to identify the change in safety that some sort of countermeasure or geometric change has that will impact a location, I want at least 3, preferably 5 years of crash data before and after. Right? That's not realistic for a study like this. So we use post-encroachment time. And what post-encroachment time is simply the time difference between when one user vacates what we term a conflict zone to the other user arrives there. Okay? And when you look in the literature, typically you see if a PET value is less than 1.5 seconds or so, it's termed a severe conflict. 1.5 to 3.5 seconds is a moderate conflict, and then 3.5 seconds or greater is a minor conflict, right? Which doesn't really tell the whole story, because if one of these vehicles is standing still and the other one is moving, is that really that severe? So anyway, this is what we went with. What TTC is out there. Our time to collision, we chose to go with this one just because we thought this was best thing we could get with our data collection techniques we had available for us. Right. So here's an example interaction. We've got this Nissan parked here in the crosswalk, just waiting to turn right. Right. And then there's our pedestrian walking across. Right. And then the vehicle goes ahead and turns right. Right. So this is a typical camera view. That you'll see that actually all of ours were similar to this. To get this information, the students collected the pending vehicle speed, pending vehicle volume, pending vehicle direction, as well as if there were any violations. So this one, my pen's going this way, we just saw the video. Here's our identified conflict block, and then a PET value of 1.2 seconds. Right. Does that look like a really severe conflict? Not really. I mean, presumably, this person, I'm a runner, and so I would make eye contact with this person if at all possible, or make sure that they see me in some way, shape, or form, right? So, so yeah, that's just one example of thousands of these data points that were collected. Right? One thing I will point out, and this comes in not really the point, but this is on our last slide, our limitation, is that we were, at the onset and at the budgeting portion of the project, we were expecting to get event-based data out of the traffic controller. So we expect to be able to get the on and off times of all the phases, the greens, yellows, reds, walks, flashing no walks. Phoenix is in the process of solving communication issues. They've got 1,200 signals, and they built their Ethernet network flat within that, right? So they had 12,000 devices trying to talk to each other. So imagine if 12,000 people were all talking to them. So it's actually, I'm kind of curious how they solve it, because it could be a good paper from an academic standpoint, because I'm sure Phoenix is not the only agency that's gone out there that's done. Yeah.
City of Salem had this issue about that one.
Yeah, it's just all this. I mean, so we have another project with Phoenix where we worked with Kimley Horn to install kits on about half of their signals, 550, and one of our big jobs, other than evaluation, is configuration of it. And so you can see these network storms roll across the network on communication streams. So if you ever have a choice to segment your network into virtual LANs, please do it. Earlier, better than later. Anyway, because of that, we couldn't get any event-based data. So our students had to look at, luckily they have younger, better eyes than I do, but look at the actual indications that are on the screen. So that imputed some error into the data collection, just inherently, because while this is a pretty good view right now, as the sun lowers down, or if the sun was the other direction, sometimes you just can't see it, and you have to go based upon vehicle movement. So, which is okay when there's no LPI, but when there's an LPI, vehicles don't move, right? So, yeah, anyway. So, before to after, right, again, we had 80 hours of before video and then 80 hours of after video. So I look at this plot here, and I'm just looking at my percent of conflict observations. I have what's termed as high severity, mid severity, and low severity conflicts. Right, on the left in the blue is before, on the right in orange is after. We did have a few fewer conflicts after, which now we didn't normalize this for pedestrian volumes or for vehicle volumes, and this is just simply we did have fewer conflicts, so I wouldn't, this may be attributed to the LPI, but I wouldn't make that judgment based upon just what we did. But what is interesting is that we did see a reduction in those high severity conflicts, as well as the mid severity conflicts, and an increase in low severity conflicts. So just looking at this, it does look like the LPI did something beneficial by making those conflicts less severe and separating those users in time by a little bit. Right. Other information that we looked at, so we looked at vehicle speed and pedestrian speed. We just simply had 2 points on the screen. James can tell you about it. And then based upon the frame captures and when the users cross those spots, we were able to pull the speed out of that. We did actually use speed, you'll see on the next slide for this, but you do see that things didn't change very much, certainly not operationally significant. Right, we looked at whether the conflicts were with a left turning vehicle or a right turning vehicle. That did not change very much. Interestingly enough, the first unit to the conflict, we did see a little bit of reduction. Before, the pedestrian was the first unit to the conflict, and the after, the vehicle was a little more the first unit to the conflict. I haven't really thought too deeply about that, but that could be as a result of just, with when the walk indication comes up, vehicles might already be out there. I don't know. I haven't really thought through that. We did see that as a change. So we took our median speed. Can't remember if it was mean or median, but they're pretty close. So our mean vehicle speed, about 11.5, and we determined that, we just said, hey, if we're going faster than that, that's a high speed, slower than that, that's a low speed. We use this approach on a similar data analysis for Oregon DOT about 6 or 7 years ago, looking at bicycle LPIs and things like bicycle movements and bicycle conflicts at intersections. So if we segment these into PET vehicle categories, one is the most severe. So one is my shortest PET value with a high speed. 2 is shortest PET value with a lower speed. Middle PET high speed, middle PET low speed, and so on and so forth. We do still see that similar trend of a reduction in conflicts in those severe conflicts, with an increase in the least amount of the least severe conflicts. Other things that we collected during this was there an evasive action? Was someone on their phone? Crosswalk violations? We looked at pedestrian group size, pedestrian gender, pedestrian age, and these are gender and age are things that you're looking at a camera that's a grainy video. You're doing the best you can with what's out there. I can't remember offhand what our ages were, but I expect it was probably 25 and under, 24, 26 to 50, and then James might actually remember, I don't know. And then additional mobility devices, which can be anything from a scooter to a one-wheel to unicycle. Well, that's more of a Flagstaff thing. We had a guy on the road a unicycle for a long time on Flagstaff. So the reason that so all this extra information we collected because we wanted to run models to see what were the factors that impacted the changes in vehicle, changes in conflicts, right? So we looked at we developed a series of negative binomial models that looked at all reduced conflicts, high severity conflicts, and then high severity, high speed conflicts, right? And we looked at these with different combinations of volume. One of the things that we were very pragmatic about during this, as well as really the entire project, was we wanted to come up with something that is reasonable for a Phoenix Streets Transportation Department employee to implement, right? So if I have to put in the average pedestrian group size and then percentage of people with a mobility device into a model, that's kind of a pain in the rear for someone to develop that information, right? So while we were looking at our various model options, we really kept an eye on like what's reasonable from a data collection standpoint for the city to pull together to be able to run this. We just don't want it to be too painful, and to be able to actually use the product that we put together for them. We settled on this model here. I will proudly state that I believe this is the only equation in this seminar today, so you're welcome for that. Right, so what you're looking at here is two plots with and without the LPI. Right, so on the y-axis I have my hourly predicted conflicts. The x-axis I have my hourly crossing pedestrian volume, and then each one of these trace lines. I apologize to those that are that may be colorblind. This was not a 508 report, so this is there's a lot going on here. But these are in the same order from amounts of turning vehicles. So each one of these trace lines represents a different turning vehicle volume, right? So this gray line you see up here, up top, that is 700 turning vehicles per hour. And if I look without the LPI, if I've got, say, 125 pedestrians crossing, I take this up here about 19 or so hourly predicted conflicts. I come over here to with an LPI, and my model is predicting about 9 to 10. Right? Pretty big reduction, and again, that's for 1 hour. This is what we mean by data-driven. In the title of this presentation is that this information, number of turning vehicles and pedestrians, went directly into our guidance that we provide the city of Phoenix. So, summary of the conflict analysis. Right, we analyzed conflicts at 8 intersections, focusing on a PET of less than 5 seconds. Our regression models predicted a 10 to 50% reduction in total conflicts and 45 to 50% reduction in severe conflicts. And this is the model we went with. Right? We went with the severe conflict reduction model. So we also did an ordered logit model and confirmed that significant reduction in high and medium severity conflicts. And then other items, vehicle direction, violations, pedestrian group size also influenced conflict severity, right? But these did not make it into the guidance, just simply for ease of making it useful guidance. Okay, so this is what we developed for a flow chart. I'll walk through this on the next couple of slides. Effectively, we're taking, collecting data on an intersection and a crosswalk level basis, putting it into a score sheet, coming up with a number at the end of it. Right. I start off with data collection at the intersection level. So I'm looking at crash history. I'm looking at vehicular level service. I'm looking at the geometry, the built environment, as well as pedestrian vehicle volumes, right? And we have some information here as far as where, this is guidance for the city of Phoenix on how to go ahead and get to this. So we're looking at when we collect pedestrian data, this is October through April, right? Because the model was built on data that was collected in the fall, right? So we really need to be in that same area. Vehicle volume, same thing. Some of the geometric items, those aren't going to change along the year, but you can pull those off of Google Maps or other areas. Level of service was an interesting one. This is done using presumably Synchro. I think that's what Phoenix uses. Looking at the actual, so we're still looking at, we've collected the data, right? And now we're looking at actually pulling together a score sheet for this to get to a certain number of points, right? So based on the number of turning vehicle pedestrian clashes you have, if you have 3 or more crashes, you have 3 points. 2 crashes, 2 points, 1 crash, 1 point. There's nothing, 0. One-way street. Why might a one-way street be on this sheet? Well, driving behavior changes, right? So when you have nobody coming at you and you're turning left or right, I mean, you're not acting the same way because you're not looking for that conflicting movement. So you may not be as observant to other things that are out there, right? Intersection distance from a school and transit stop, we've got more activity, right? It's more likely to have people out there. And then the last one is travel delay. This one we went around the room quite a bit and with Phoenix to get to an idea, to a level of what do we use for a penalty for travel delay. This can be a contentious subject, should you have anything in here at all. Right? It really depends upon the agency. One of the things I talk about in my traffic engineering class is trade-offs. Like everything is a trade-off in traffic. Right? I-17 is the main freeway, or the only freeway that goes from Flagstaff to Phoenix. And one of the slides I have a picture of a speed limit sign that says speed limit 80. We only have 75 in Arizona, but it says 80 and speed limit 10. Right? And I say, well, what happens to safety if I bump the speed limit down to 10? It's going to increase, right? Well, still a fatality because someone probably have a heart attack. But is that reasonable? Is it reasonable to ask those facilities to operate at that? So I take my 2-hour drive to Phoenix, I turn it into a 15-hour drive, right? Everyone has just different opinions on that. That is why we have a travel delay penalty. So when one approach goes to a level service of D, there's a reduction of a point. If the whole intersection goes below level of service D, you drop off a couple of points. Right? Looking at the crosswalk level, this is the modeling that we did, our pedestrian volume, looking at what our break points were. So more than 100 pedestrians, we have 3 points, and so on and so forth. Turning vehicle volumes, 400, 100, 400, and 600 were our cutoffs for that. Right? T intersection. This is similar to that one-way intersection where if you're in a T intersection, you may not have conflicts from all directions. So you might have a higher vehicle speed. You're not waiting for traffic. Side obstruction or a skewed approach. If you're looking over your shoulder like this to make your turn, you're maybe less likely to see the actual pedestrian that's out there. One thing you'll note you'll see our footnotes down here, items with a 1. This is used in other published guidance. So part of our literature review is to dig in and see what all the different types of guidance that were out there. There's generally 2 types of guidances. There's prescriptive and descriptive. Prescriptive is something that's similar to this with a score sheet, and descriptive is more flowcharty, where there's just kind of some, well, this is going on, you should look at this, consider that. We try to hit right in the middle of that, right? Items done by us, and then there's also some information just as far as how to actually collect the data that you're going to use. Right, so once we have scores, right, we go and we go ahead and put these into, we take the scores, and we always evaluate crosswalks in pairs. Why would I want to do that?
Implemented in pairs.
Well, you want to implement it in pairs. We looked at this from a standpoint of making sure that the walk indications come on at the identical time on both sides of the intersection for those that may be using the sound of the vehicles to start to cross. And that's a whole other discussion with an LPI. But that was one of the reasons we went with that. So we look at them in pairs, and we go ahead and just pull together scores, and then, we determine whether or not and this is where the legal wording comes into it, whether or not an LPI is optional, considered, or recommended. Right? We chose those 3 words specifically because we're aware that this is a proven countermeasure. right? But it's not reasonable, or may not be reasonable to put these at every location in the city. There's a lot of text on this slide, and this is, I don't want to say like the fine print, but it's just a bunch of other information that Phoenix should consider when implementing an LPI. We gave them some guidance on number one. If there's no adjacent crosswalk, you can select various numbers. If not already installed, advanced pedestrian devices should be installed at all corners. And this gets to doing these things in pairs, but we want to be able to tell everybody at the intersection, regardless of physical ability, when the LPI comes on. We can't do that if there's no voice prompt. At locations with LPIs, left turn protection should lag the through movement only. So having we actually saw this in our implementation process where people would continue to turn through that through the all red into the LPI if there was a protected arrow prior to that LPI. Flash yellow arrow, hold that indication red until the LPI ends. We used 5 seconds. You can use different durations for this. Number 7 is something that I will admit, and from talking to Simon, our contact at the City of Phoenix, most of Phoenix runs coordinated to big grid, right? So your analysis for the vehicular delay can't just be at that one intersection. You really have to look at the whole corridor. Because if you're changing the onset of the green by 5 seconds on a coordinated movement, if we just do the one location, that's going to cause challenges up and down the corridor. So there's a bit more to it. Certainly use a traffic control change or new pedestrian head start to inform drivers that something has changed. And then there's other things that you may want to do perhaps putting signal head shields on so that drivers can't anticipate the green interval, or no right turn on red could be considered, but as I mentioned earlier, we did try that out in Phoenix, one location. It may be more effective in downtown where there are more pedestrians and tighter geometry, but we didn't see a lot of success with that in this study. Right, so limitations for this, the crash analysis was conducted at the intersection level, not at the crosswalk level. So we don't know exactly where at the intersection those crashes occurred. There was also an absence of volumes in the crash analysis. We didn't have pedestrian volumes as part of that. As I noted earlier, manual data reduction may introduce counting or measurement errors. That's just inherent. There's going to be error in anything that you count or measure. And then direct sunlight may have caused, or certainly caused, visibility challenges. And the traffic light setup is based upon user activity and those data points. So that's the end of my presentation here. We do have a few publications. One of these was in the it was in the ITE journal about a year or so ago. The entire report is up on Phoenix's website. Yeah, that's this one here. I do have a link for that isn't in this, but I can provide that link. But as I noted, there was also a lot of other good information in this project. One of my, he's a PhD student now, Tony Yeshin, spent a whole summer waving his hand in front of a pedestrian push button. In our lab, we hooked up 2 different push buttons from 2 different vendors, and then just looked at, if you waved your hand here and there, how many times did it actually activate. He actually broke Steve Gerke's space heater because he used it to heat it up, because what happens in Phoenix? The button gets hot. Does it change behavior, right? We turn the lights off, did all sorts of stuff. So I don't think we should place Steve's heater in. I think Steve's bitter about that. But anyway, that's it. Questions?
Great, thank you very much. We'll start with some questions in the room. We have lots of online questions. I want to alternate and start with you.
I had some 2 questions related to just the study. I noticed on the photo you showed, the markings for the crosswalk were degraded and causing maybe complicit of the driver moving into that space. So did you look at like how well crosswalks were, particularly right on red, that impact any of those sites? And then the second question was, answer that and I'll remember the second question.
It's a great point, we did not.
Okay. Yeah, and the second question is, you mentioned that you use the standard LPI, just number, for all sites, and it was just, what, 5 seconds?
We used 5 seconds.
Did you think about like, hey, if I change it to 6 or 7, how that may reduce, particularly for those very long Arizona crossings, did that eliminate some of the conflicts? Is there a cost benefit to that,
We didn't do that in this study. It's a great point. It's not out there in the literature as far as we found. I actually had a student that on a fellowship last year that was working on a project to do this sort of data reduction automatically, as opposed to the vendors that charge you complete margin of money to do it for your local intersections. That could be a way that we could actually get some information on that. This was. We actually didn't do part of the field evaluation. We had another field evaluation scheduled to actually look at whether or not there were false activations from the no-touch push buttons, but we didn't get to that because we used all the money on the data reduction. So thanks, James. Because there was just a lot going on. But that's a great point. Yeah. It'd be nice to see that good information to have.
I'm going to jump in with some of these, but raise your hand. First of all, a shout out. Thank you for recognizing color blindness. Shout out from some viewers out there. A couple quick ones, I think. Are you providing accessible pedestrian signals at these LPI crossings?
So that is up to the city of Phoenix.
Okay.
Right. That was our guidance was that guidelines that I presented were a combination of guidance from data we collected and analyzed in this, as well as what other folks have done out there and what other recommendations we saw out there.
Okay.
So.
And then someone did ask about combining no turn on red signal with the LPI, and you did address that in the beginning.
Oh, so we didn't. We did not do a combination.
Instead.
So we did no turn on red instead of the LPI. Okay. So we did not combine. That's a great idea to see what would happen.
Okay. Research gaps. Go ahead.
Not research gaps, but and forgive me if you mentioned this, but you did a crash analysis, you said at the beginning.
Two purposes. One was to get an idea of what, as we look at things that Toronto found, I think Florida DOT has one out too, was to see were those really important based on the data we saw here, and that drove what appeared in our recommendations at the end, as well as to give us an idea of where we have the challenges. We haven't really gone back and looked and seen if there are correlations. The city of Phoenix has started to do some evaluations of this, but I'm not aware. They do have these implemented at various locations in the city, but I haven't really been in that close a touch with our contacts other to see if they what they've done.
Yeah, in the room.
Maybe a similar question off of that. You had your matrix to get to the recommended locations for LPI. Was there any determinants of what ends up getting something into the LPI that might be, or into the recommended box, that might be simpler than the matrix? For example, if you had a crash, you tended to get into the recommended anyways, or any kind of like simplification to like cut the line on the analysis.
I mean, there's probably always the political warrant, right? When something important wants one implemented, it'll probably get done. And I'm not saying that is just for Phoenix, right? That happens everywhere. But we didn't have a shortcut. That's a good idea. If something just like happens out there, yeah, done.
One here, and then I'll go back online.
From looking at LPIs, as much as you have, what particular time you prefer? Try 5, mentioned that so you probably use 5 to 8.
No, I mean, we use 5 seconds in this work. I will say that I would only want to implement them when I actually needed them, just to make sure that drivers would continue to kind of respect them. Because if they're there all the time, drivers may get used to them. And again, this really depends on the driver population and how aggressive they might be. Some areas this may not be an issue, but certainly in Phoenix, go for a run down there and put across, you have a walk, someone looks at you and waves at you and cuts you off. That's like the Phoenix hello from a car, right? So that would probably be my only thought I really have on that is that we have things like this. If it's possible to only implement them at certain times of the day when they're most effective, is to try and do that. I understand that we're not going to see all the safety benefit that we could see because, again, proven countermeasure. But this gets back to looking at this as a trade, identify or acknowledging that we do have trade-offs and that there is a political climate. And I don't mean right left. I just mean simply putting these things out on the street as to whether or not folks will adhere to them.
Great. Okay, some more questions here. I'm going to recognize that it's the city of Phoenix that's implementing, not you, but from your research perspective, just curious about 5 seconds. Did you consider giving 1 second of an all red clearances to crossing pedestrians before LPI taking effect?
So the city of Phoenix is already using all reds.
Okay.
So I presume those are in there. I'm not sure what formula they're using. I know they have been, they have recently done a study with the University of Arizona looking at changes in behavior based upon the newer ITE recommended clearance interval calculation. So they are involved in that. So I presume the LPI, I presume that the all reds were not changed. We were not involved in any of the signal timing changes for this, so we worked with Eric Hernandez and his crew at the signal shop and just, hey, we need 5 seconds. Y'all figure out how you want to do it to make it work. So I don't have timing sheets on that or anything like that. So
I think one clarification question I didn't catch soon enough to when it came up. What does the first unit of conflict mean?
So it's the first person to the spot. Right, so if you were going to walk this way to the table and I were going to walk behind you, you'd be the first unit.
That's what I thought. Good clarification. Another sort of clarification, the PET calculation, was that based on simulation, analyzed by LiDAR and cameras, or a person?
Humans did that. So we have massive spreadsheets that have all the information logged in there by our students. So.
Great. Okay. Oh, question in the room?
Another data collection question. As part of your initial work, you analyzed all of the signals in Phoenix, then you had all those different factors, like if there was a right turn lane. Did you publish that publicly, or do you have any thoughts about how that information can be shared?
That one, that's this.
It's already on the screen.
Yeah.
I feel like that's always a question on projects.
No,
like, where are the right turn lanes?
So Dr. Russo is the one that led that part of it, and this is where we augmented it with UTC money. We're part of the Region 9 of UTC to be able to do all the data collections. We didn't really need to get all those characteristics from all 1,200 intersections for just this body. We wanted to get an idea of what that was. So so that would be, I think it's this one. Yeah, examiners turn vehicle best progress intersection. So.
And those of you who are watching, or we'll do a follow-up email with some of these links and et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to combine a couple online questions. One about, did you observe any bicyclists using the LPI? And then a sort of related question was if you sort of characterized pedestrians who are using a wheelchair or a white cane or sort of other mobility devices versus.
So we didn't have an indicator for for pedestrian that would have any kind of a mobility device. So a cane or anything else would have been caught by that. Bicycles, we treated them as vehicles unless they're being walked across the crosswalk.
Great. Yes.
Yeah, just real quick. I know you were limited in resources and what you could use, but did you consider using any infographic type of information, like age specifically, for indicating where you might want to implement, and also how long the LPI could or should be?
So as far as demographics, Dr. Russo led the modeling on this, but I can almost guarantee that we had those variables in there at some point. I can't remember offhand if they were significant, but those would be a hard one to ask the city to collect implementation guideline. The last question about the duration of the LPI, we didn't look at that very much in this. We just went with 5 seconds. And your middle question again was?
It was mostly just to see if that went to account on that, deciding on that 5 seconds, or if that could be way to go with more of a Portland model of if it's close to like a retirement community, then it might be a little longer.
We did have, as part of the guidance, we do have proximity to a school and to a transit stop as that. So we didn't have other community centers. That could be part of it too. That's a good idea.
The crossings you chose for crossings of major streets or minor streets or both?
So the crossings they were all pretty much major streets, that would be driven by our crash analysis, where we had the most issues that were shown.
I'm going to insert a quick question here that was related. Did any of these have median refuge islands?
Let's go look. We're not looking. Can you? There we go. Yeah, I think. I wouldn't call it refuge, but you could. You could. Phoenix doesn't do, at least certainly none of these locations, they do a 2-stage crossing. But yeah.
Okay, question in the room?
Yeah, so they leave that up. So for example, the top right one.
Yep.
You analyzed I can't even read those numbers, 4 and 3.
Yes.
But you didn't do the parallel, that's what you meant, you looked at 2.
Yeah, so we didn't want to have, even if one of these intersections, had the top 4 cross products in our list, we didn't want to have more than 2 crosswalks at the same intersection. We wanted a little bit of a variety of locations.
And I'm not sure if you know this off the top of your head, and I don't think it was in one of the tables. What was the average crossing time of pedestrians?
So these are typically 110-foot streets, so 3.5 seconds, 110 divided by 3.5, 25, 30 seconds.
Yeah, but you didn't, I mean,
we didn't do the speed.
You didn't measure how long it took the people to get across.
We did have a speed. Yeah, that was.
I don't know if you gave the data.
Yeah, mean pedestrian speed.
Yeah, but
So it's pretty quick.
I'm sure somewhere in your analysis you have, like, how long it took them to get across.
I don't think we.
Travel time.
I don't think we measured that. I don't think we measured time from from when they left the curb to when they got.
It's just interesting with LPI. It's like, okay.
Does that change it?
Yeah, like, what is 5 seconds of a 40-second, or for older adults, it might take longer, these type of.
Yeah.
I mean, you could extrapolate it out based upon that, but that's just based upon a little bit of.
Okay, I'm going to pick one of the maybe meatier questions here. It looks as though you considered each intersection as an independent site. However, some elements are bound to be related. For example, driver frustration because of delay is bound to be cumulative across the network. Do you think your results might vary if you were able to account for spatial relationships or dependencies among intersections? You did acknowledge that this is a network, but...
I mean, any study is going to be improved if I have access to more variables, more data to understand that, right? That's it's a good idea for something that will be funded by a UTC or something like that, but I can't see a city wanting to fund something like that. That's a great idea.
It's a reality of research there.
Yeah.
And I might be going, we have at least one official minute left here. A broader question, do you think the public needs to be educated as to why the safety countermeasure was beneficial and or how to use LPIs?
I don't think LPIs need that much education. I mean, that is one of the 4 E's of traffic safety. I mean, if you know what the walk indication means, which not everybody knows what that walk indication means, I have an anecdote I can tell afterwards about that, right? But I think there are other traffic control measures like the ped hybrid beacon or the hawk, where from a vehicular standpoint, doesn't seem like anyone knows what that means. Even Flagstaff, we've had one for 7 or 8 years now, and still no one seems to know what that means.
I think maybe, and I don't know if I'm interpreting too much of the question, and I'm hoping, I know there's a question on here about whether or not our online audience can hear, and my apologies if the mic is not picking up the Q&A well enough. But I think, the pedestrians understand how it works, but do we think the larger driving public maybe needs to understand what these are and why they're waiting?
So certainly more education helps. I mentioned the 4 E's of traffic safety. Enforcement is another one. So if folks are not, if we allow right turns on red and folks are not actually stopping before that right turn on red, that's a challenge. Might they be more apt to stop if they knew that the whole point of this was to make pedestrians or to improve pedestrian safety? I'd like to say that they would. I don't know if that's true. But again, I think the more that people know about why we do things the way we do as transportation engineers and planners as well, I think they're more likely to understand and likely follow by the rules that we set forth out there to hopefully keep all the users safe.
And since we are just over our time, I'm going to do one more inside the room question for a new one.
One of the charts that you showed had volumes of pedestrians up to 700. Yes? So
that was turning vehicles.
it's turning vehicles.
Yes.
What was your highest pedestrian volume?
At one of our sites, the third in Washington was the highest at 166. But this is in 1 hour. This isn't
right. Okay, so I'm wondering about like driver expectation. If I'm on the road and I need to turn and I have 166 pedestrians an hour, I can expect pedestrians. So would you recommend using an LPI in those locations where it's expected that pedestrians are going to be there?
I think I can go back. I'll go back to my earlier comment where we only put these where we only operate them where they're going to make the most impact. Certainly in a network like Phoenix. So I wouldn't disagree with your comment that if I'm going to have this that many pedestrians downtown, maybe I just run the LPI all the time, or I just do that at all my locations in downtown.
Or why run it at all?
I see where you're getting at. So I always have pedestrians out there, so they're always going to be there. So, but I think with the LPI, one of the benefits of the LPI is it allows people to get off the curb if I have a large turning volume of vehicles. So I think it would still have that benefit. Okay.
All right, I am going to close us out. For the folks online, I know we didn't get to quite all of your questions. Apologies for running out of time. We will share them with Ed afterwards. I want to thank everyone who came to join us today and thank our speaker. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.